Jesus way,
oh, the Jesus way,
is the way of peace.
is the way of peace.
Oh, the Jesus way,
Oh, the Jesus way,
is the way of peace.
is the way of peace.
Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. When he is king, all wars will cease. May his peace begin with me. I'm gonna beat my sword
Gonna beat my sword
into a plow.
into a plow.
Gonna beat my sword
Gonna beat my sword
into a plow.
into a plow.
Gonna beat my sword into a plow. Christ is king in my life now. May his peace begin with me.
The thing is with heroin, once you try it, it gets in your brain, and the memory of that high, you can't get rid of it. So anytime life goes bad, or you want to, it's boring even, and you want something stimulating, that you, for $10, you can.
Wow, $10.
Yeah.
Wow.
So in January of 2014, police came to the door and informed me that she had overdosed that night and died.
And died.
And so we've been living with that since, and we decided not to make a secret of that. And in fact, her obituary said she died of an unintentional drug overdose. And because we want people to be aware of the dangers, and other young people to be aware that, you can't really just play around with this stuff. It's lethal.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, she's part of a statistic. In Pennsylvania, that year, the deaths from heroin overdoses increased like 70% in one
Really?
year. 1 year, and so it's a real problem. And this isn't, this is among the general populace. So it's a danger.
This is the story of Elizabeth Kline Smeltzer, who was born in Modesto, California, and lived for 21 years. She died in Pennsylvania, January 25th, 2014. She was the daughter of Bonnie and Ken Kline Smeltzer. We wish to share with you part of her story. We were able to meet with her father, Ken Kline Smeltzer, and he agreed to talk with us about the very sensitive and personal aspects of her life and the issues involved. Ken is widely known in the Church of the Brethren circles as the director of Song and Story Fest. The fest is an annual family camp featuring musicians and storytellers from all over the country. Ken's wife, Bonnie Kline Smeltzer, is the pastor of the University Baptist and Brethren Church of State College, Pennsylvania. They both hope that they might be able to save at least one individual from the tragedy which claimed their daughter, Elizabeth Kline Smeltzer. The statistics are very troubling. In 2014, the nation saw another rise in fatal overdoses. 47,055 people died from prescription opiates and heroin, which accounted for much of the increase. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, that number was nearly 3 times as many as the drug overdoses recorded in 1999. The annual totals have spiked year after year during the last 15 years. In 2014, the deaths from just heroin tripled over the last 4 years. According to authorities, cheap heroin prices have made the drug more available, leading to many more deaths. Ken Kline Smeltzer has a long history in the Church of the Brethren. We met with Ken Kline Smeltzer at the 2015 Mountain Meadows Song and Story Fest, held in New Meadows, Idaho. We asked Ken to start by sharing his history of involvement in the Church of the Brethren. I'm curious, have you been a Brethren all your life? Were you born into a Brethren family?
Absolutely. I was born into a multi-generational Brethren family. My grandparents were Church of the Brethren. In fact, one grandparent was a minister. My father was a minister in the Church of the Brethren. But he never pastored much. He was on staff at at the general offices in Elgin, Illinois. He was mostly peace and social justice, that kind of thing. And then at the end of his life, he was the Washington office representative of the Church of the Brethren.
In Washington, D.C.?
In Washington, D.C., which meant that he was there to educate the brethren about national issues of interest to the brethren, not just religious issues, but issues like civil rights, peace, anything the brethren had an interest in. And then he was also there to lobby on behalf of the church, lobby the federal government to try and get legislation or actions that would be beneficial to humankind from a brethren point of view. So I grew up in the Church of the Brethren, kind of in the headquarters town. I grew up in the Highland Avenue Church of the Brethren.
In Elgin, Illinois?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, from when I was 3 to when I was through high school. And, you know, I heard about the church a lot at home, and that's, you know, that was a main topic of conversation, and actually about my father's struggles to get the church more active politically or socially in support of civil rights and so forth. So oftentimes he would complain about the slowness of the church in responding, or the conservatism. And so, you know, I picked it up, and I wasn't sure that I really wanted to be that all involved in the Church of the Brethren, but you know, if you're brethren and you've been to annual conference just about every year of your life, as a kid, we went every year because my dad had to be there, and so we turned it into a family trip.
So this is the early 50s as you're growing up.
Yeah,
and
50s
civil
and
rights
60s.
is the main topic of
Yeah,
what's
well,
going on.
60s. It didn't get to be the main topic until the 60s. Before that was more peace. But we went, you know, and then I was born in 51, so I was 18 in 69, and when the Vietnam War was raging, and so we advocated for peace and an end to the war through the church as well as outside the church. So I picked up a lot of my parents' values about peace and nonviolence and justice for all. I was involved in a high school underground newspaper in which we pushed those values with other young men, young people, or I guess we were girls and boys at that age.
So this is a public high school?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, public schools. We had a paper. Then when it came time to go to college, I didn't really want to go to a Brethren college. I wanted to enter the larger world, and I did that. And
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Antioch College in Ohio.
Oh, really?
For, about 2.5 quarters. The war was big. I decided at Antioch you had to be self-motivated, self-directed, and I didn't really know why I was in college at that time. So I quit. I dropped out, went home, got drafted, but I was a CO, and they didn't hear your claim to be a conscientious objector until you were drafted.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You got drafted first?
Yeah, they didn't want to bother hearing
my.
people who weren't going to be drafted. So at that time, we had a draft lottery system, and I was number 82, my birth date. So they were calling me up. I had my physical, but then I went to the draft board and convinced them I was a conscientious objector.
Did you have to make a personal appearance?
Oh, yeah, personal appearance. My dad went with me. You had to have a lot of written forms. You would answer questions. And so they granted me that status, so then I had to do 2 years of alternative service, and I chose to do it in BVS, and I wound up actually going to Europe and serving a couple places in Austria and in Spain. It was great.
Nice.
I joined
That's a nice way
BVS
to
and
serve.
saw the world, and then I came back, went to college in D.C., but when I was gone, my parents moved from Elgin to D.C. Studied environmental studies.
Where?
At George Washington University.
Another famous college.
In right downtown D.C. So I rode. My parents lived on Capitol Hill. I rode by bike past the Capitol building, down Pennsylvania Avenue, past the White House, and about 4 blocks west of the White House is George Washington University. And so I was right there for three years. Majored in environmental studies. Decided to go to grad school in city and regional planning, 2-year program in Cornell. And halfway through that, I met my wife-to-be at Bonnie Klein at the Church of the Brethren annual conference. So even though I was kind of pulling away some from the church, I kept coming to conferences, and I saw we met one summer, got serious by Christmas time, and by the next fall we were married, and And she had already started at Bethany Seminary. She had completed a year when we got married.
Now that's in Indiana.
That was in Illinois at the time.
Okay.
And so I moved to Illinois, got a job at Argonne National Lab, which is a Department of Energy laboratory.
And part of the Defense Department.
Well, no, part of the Energy Department.
Okay.
But they had worked on nuclear weapons back when, during the Second World War.
I still think they have a contract with it.
Well, they probably have some. But they were looking at everything. I was looking at doing energy and solar energy, and the impacts of solar energy technologies versus conventional technologies. So I did that for a year and a half, and then I started taking courses at seminary, and I realized that the church of the Brethren, but also the wider church, Christian church, there was room enough in its spectrum for guys like me who didn't exactly believe all the Orthodox theology. I mean, there were Kierkegaard and Tillich and other thinkers who had expanded minds and could think outside the box. And so I went to seminary and really enjoyed seminary. And
at the Brethren Seminary, could you think in that way? And
oh yeah. They encouraged broad thinking, and I mean, we had all kinds of folks there. I'm probably about as far left as you get in the Church of the Brethren, in terms of going through Bethany. Oh no, actually, probably not. I'm sure there's a number who went to Bethany for a while and decided the church was just too conservative. They couldn't stay in it. But I found that I could be in the church and both communicate with people, normal people, and as well as hold true to my beliefs. And so, and also being there, I realized, well, if Bonnie was being trained as a pastor, I wanted to be trained as a pastor as well, so that our church, our personal life was going to revolve around the church anyway. As a pastor, that's the reality. So I might as well get fully trained and be able to participate in that as well. So that's what I did.
Rather than just be the pastor's husband.
Exactly. So even, when she graduated 2 years ahead of me because she'd started before, and she got an associate pastor job back in my home church in Elgin, Illinois, at the Highland Avenue. And then when I graduated, we shared that job as associate pastors there. There was a senior pastor as well, Sam Flora, for a couple of years, and we got kind of antsy and wanted our own church, so that's when we moved to California, Modesto, California, as co-pastors there. And we were co-pastors each three-quarter time at Modesto Church of the Brethren for 16 years.
16 years?
16 years.
That worked out really well.
It worked out really well. And yeah, we enjoyed our time in California. We were there 16 years. We moved there in '86 with a 1-year-old, our son Jesse. And well, pretty soon after we moved, we discovered he had a brain tumor, and he was almost incapacitated. And it was at that point that people from around the Church of the Brethren all over the country were praying for us and for him, and we realized the importance of our Brethren support group and family and network, and have felt those connections even then. And well, he had brain surgery, and then chemotherapy following that, and then when he was 5, he had radiation treatments. But he's now alive and well. He's just turned 30 this past week, and is doing well. He's independent.
You also have a daughter. Was she born in Modesto?
Yeah, she was born in Modesto in 1992. And actually, we adopted her. We found out about her and adopted her at birth. And so she was a great addition to the family. Elizabeth was her name. And so we lived there until she was going into 5th grade. And at that time, we decided it was time for a change for us. When you're pastoring together and you're also parenting together and you're also husband and wife together, it's a little too much togetherness. So we decided that after 16 years there plus 3 years before of pastoring together, we probably should look for separate jobs. And so we went on the job search, and Bonnie got the offer to be a pastor Pennsylvania, in State College, Pennsylvania, at the University Baptist and Brethren Church in State College. It's a joint American Baptist and Church of the Brethren congregation. So we moved to Pennsylvania in 2002, and she pastored, and I got us moved in and went shopping for custom Amish furniture for a while, and worked at Centerpiece, a prison ministry, for a year or so. And then I started a handyman business, and there was a church nearby looking for an interim pastor, so I began interim pastor work, half-time interim at the Burnham Church of the Brethren, about half hour down the road from where we lived. So, you know, life was good, and you know, I'll just share that Lizzie had some struggle with drugs, and you know, we didn't quite realize the extent of her experimentation and so forth until one night she overdosed on heroin.
Ooh.
And the police called us, and she had been sent to the hospital by then, and she recovered all right. That we went to the hospital that night, and if they catch it fast enough, they can give you a drug to counteract it. And so then she went to an inpatient rehab for a month, and meetings and so forth after that. But
and how old is she?
She was at that time, I guess 19.
Wow, just out of high school.
Yeah, she had started Penn State and had done most of a year, but then had pulled back to maybe a course or two.
I mean, for me, it's hard to imagine that there's heroin that available to be, you know, available to high school students,
right,
or people out of high school,
right,
in Penn State. I kind of think of it as a big city thing, you know, in Chicago, LA, New York.
Well, that's actually a misconception, because well, heroin is no longer, you know, just a ghetto or a, you know, black persons or a minority. It's spread all over the country, and actually it's quite cheap and quite pure.
Mm.
And a lot of people these days get hooked on painkillers, OxyContin, oxycodone, those kind of things, which have an opioid in them. And then when they can't get them anymore, their prescription's over, they somehow get hooked, and then they switch to heroin because it's cheaper, actually cheaper. And
I've heard people who are really addicted to OxyContin said it's a terribly thing, hard to detox and get off of it.
We don't, that wasn't really Lizzie's path. She, I think, was just thought, you know, she could experiment and do drugs recreationally and get away with it. She wasn't like a daily user, you know, addict. But the thing is with heroin, once you try it, it gets in your brain, and the memory of that high, you can't get rid of it. So anytime life goes bad, or you want to, it's boring even, and you want something stimulating, that for $10 you can.
Wow, $10.
Yeah.
Wow.
So in January of 2014, police came to the door and informed me that she had overdosed that night and died. And so we've been living with that since, and we decided not to make a secret of that. And in fact, you know, her obituary said she died of an unintentional drug overdose, and because we want people to be aware of the dangers, and other young people to be aware that, you know, you can't really just play around with this stuff. It's lethal.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I mean, she's part of a statistic. You know, in Pennsylvania, that year, the deaths from heroin overdoses increased like 70% in one
Really?
year. 1 year, you know, and so it's a real problem. I mean, and this isn't, you know, this is among the general populace. So it's a danger.
I had no idea that heroin has become that common, but from your experience, you're saying it's quite common all over the country, and we don't make as big of a deal as it used to be, but it's very prevalent. Cheap and available.
That's right. It's cheap and available, and it's available just about anywhere. And so are I've just read this year about a new generation of synthetic drugs that are coming in from all over, but China and that aren't even regulated because you have to be a banned substance to be regulated, and these are new substances. So it's a big problem, and we've also learned to become advocates for treating people who use drugs not as criminals, but as people with a disease, people who need treatment, not necessarily punishment. And it takes treatment with patience, because often it's the first rehabilitation doesn't do the trick.
It's not a quick fix to change that kind of habit.
No, it's not. So one of the things the man that Lizzie was with when she died, and who was doing heroin with her, and who sold her dose, she died on his couch with her feet in his lap. They both fell asleep. That's how you die of heroin. You fall asleep and stop breathing, because it depresses your central nervous system. He was then charged not only with possession of paraphernalia, etc., but with the more serious crime of drug delivery leading to death, for which in Pennsylvania you can get anywhere from probation to 40 years.
Wow.
And we began advocating for him, saying most drug deliveries do not lead to death. 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 100,000, because that many people are using it. So he could not realistically foresee that this would lead to her death. So, and yet he's being held accountable by the law for her death. And he was willing to accept it. It wasn't him, but the prosecutors, who were really mostly out for notches on their belt. They want to be seen as tough on crime. They wanted to give him at least 6 years to 15 years. We said no, we didn't believe in that. We didn't think that would be helpful to him, that he needed treatment, not incarceration. That he should be treated as somebody with an addiction himself, which he has.
How old was he?
He was a few years older. I think he's 27. So we finally met him after the trial. I mean, there was no question about the facts. He agreed that he sold, and he didn't even sell them to Lizzie at a profit. He was just looking for somebody to use with. So we advocated for him. I think we got his sentence lessened from 6 years to 4 to 12. So he had already spent almost a year in prison. So, and they're supposed to give you drug treatment in prison. Whether that will actually happen or not is a good question. But in prison, you're also supposed to be drug-free, because there's not supposed to be drugs coming in and out. So he's already, drug-free. And he actually, from when he was incarcerated to the end, he looked healthier. He was doing better. So being off drugs was good for him. And some people might need prison to get off drugs, to keep. Now, whether they stay off drugs when they come out depends on if they get treatment, if they grow.
But if they can find other things to do when they're unhappy, when they're frustrated, when they're sad, lonely, tired.
I mean,
hurt.
This guy was not a degenerate. He had been trained as a ultrasound tech, and worked in a hospital till he got fired because he was using drugs. So anyway, so we've gotten aware of the prison system and the prosecution system and the incarceration system rate in our country. It especially applies to African Americans and Hispanic people. They get convicted at a higher rate. Now the guy she was with happened to be white, so white people still get convicted too. And but the war on drugs has not been successful. I mean, it's been successful in putting a lot of people in jail, but not in stopping the use of. So we learned about this in the last 2 years.
And you also worked with him while he was in prison.
We've met with him since.
Met with him.
Yeah, you can't really work with him.
Okay.
You know,
Is he in prison now?
Yeah, he's in state prison.
Okay.
Not too far from us.
We've only shared with you a very small part of the story today, but the story continues. Elizabeth's life, like those of so many other young people who overdose, was never fulfilled. Her dreams and the dreams of her family and her friends were left incomplete. Her parents, Ken and Bonnie, hope that by telling the story of Elizabeth's passing, others will benefit and the epidemic of drug overdose will be abated. It's not simple. It's not easy. It's up to us. It's up to you to be concerned, to be informed, and to be involved. For Brethren Voices, this is Brent Carlson, wishing you peace.
All those who tread the path he trod, all those who tread the path he trod, all those who tread the path he trod shall be called the friends of God. May his peace begin with me. Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. When he is king, all wars will cease. May his peace begin with me.
May his peace begin with me.
Hi, I'm Alton Brown, and I used to have a goat. Where did my goat go? Well, it went to a family who really needed it, just like the heifer cow I used to have and the water buffalo, which was really too big for my place anyway. Now, why send livestock? Why not say tractors? Because giving an animal is like giving someone a small business. All that wool, the milk, the eggs turn into income for medicine, school, clothing, a better home, a sustainable livelihood. It even produces fertilizer for crops. And of course, it makes more livestock, because you know, animals make baby animals. That's what they do. The next thing you know, the family that you gave your gift to is passing on the gift of the animal's offspring to another family who does the same thing, and so on, until pretty soon you have helped to lift an entire community out of poverty, all with your gift to Heifer International. That is a recipe for lasting change.